Hello, this is Hellbent and welcome to AutoHotkey GUI short tutorial number 16. In this one I'm going to show you how to create multiple concurrent GUIs. This is going to be the first part in a series of videos that'll teach you everything that you need to know about creating multiple GUIs. Some of them you can run at different points within your script, others you can have run at the same time, and others you can have overlapping each other. And with it, an example of that would be something like this. So here we have multiple GUIs. So for example, this control panel and all of its features within it are actually a separate GUI than other things. This player right here is a separate GUI from the background that it's standing on, and the objects here is another GUI, but they're all working in unison to create one GUI, and I can actually move it around and all of the layers stay together. So that's probably where we'll conclude this series. So for the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make multiple GUIs pop up all at the same time. So once we start working with multiple GUIs, what we're going to do is, especially if we're going to have them running all at the beginning and all of them running right from the beginning, what we want to do is we want to create sections within our script to make it easier to navigate, because once you get into multiple controls on those GUIs, it's going to be very painful to actually navigate your script if you don't break it up into sections. So for example, in the past I've done things like, if you want to create functions, you can have a section of your script where you have all your functions, and you can just create some sort of way of highlighting that section of your script, so that way when you're scrolling up and down throughout your script you can find that area really quickly. So here I have an area of functions, and I can build all my function prototypes within this area. Likewise I can do for labels and etc, etc. So we're going to do that with our GUI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 separate GUIs all at the same time when we launch our program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an area for the first one called GUI1 layout, and I'm going to highlight it in some way. Now you can use whatever method you want to use. You can use, if this isn't enough for you, you can do other things to highlight that area as needed, but you want it so that way if you're scrolling through your script you can find that area really quickly and then make adjustments to your script. Then if once you're done your script completely and you never need to look at it again, you can actually just, here, let me copy, you can just delete it and then condense everything down. But there's nothing wrong with having it like that. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna create 3 GUIs. I'm going to have GUI 2 and GUI 3. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we actually go about creating those separate GUIs. And the way we do that is by giving it a unique name. So I'm going to start off with just GUI and show. And I'm going to create a width of 250 and a height of 250. And I'm going to give it a name of GUI1. So this is going to be its title that's displayed. Before I continue, I will mention that if I want all my GUIs to show at once, what I need to do is have all my code before the first return. So all my GUIs, everything about them is going to be before this first return. So here I have my first GUI, but it doesn't know that I have more. So what I need to do is I need to give it a name, and the way I give it a name is just before the show command. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a name. So for this first example I'm going to actually use text, and the text is going to say this is GUI1. After the name of it I need a colon, and then there we go. This is not a practice that I like to do. What I prefer to do myself is I just like to give it a number. So this is GUI1. What I can also do is I can replace its name with a variable, and the way we do this is because it's not going to be expecting an expression, it's going to be expecting a string here or some other thing. What I need to do is, if I'm going to use a variable to represent the name, I need to wrap it in percentage marks. So, and then the variable, I'm going to call the variable GUI name, and then throughout the process I can switch. So I'm going to say up here GUI name, and if I'm using a string I can put it in quotes. So I'm going to do GUI1, or I can just use that numerical value that I had before. So I can say GUI name equals 1, and now instead of actually typing in that number 1, which is what I don't understand why you would want to do that, but I can just use GUI name. We're not going to do that way. What we're going to do is just use the numerical value that I prefer. So this is GUI1. All the controls and all the options for this GUI, we need to make sure that we include its name before all of the things that we do. So for example, let's make this particular GUI stay on top all the time. So we all know the GUI always on top command. Let's have a look at how we do that if we're using multiple GUIs. So I just do my normal GUI, and then I want to put the name of the GUI that I'm using, and then the command always on top. So now I know that I'm talking about the GUI that has the name GUI1, and this is what I want it to do. GUI1 always on top. Likewise, if I'm adding any controls into my GUI, so I'm going to add in a button, so GUI, and then the name of the GUI that it affects is number 1, and then add, comma, and then the control that I'm adding, which is a button. I'm not going to worry too much about its options, so I'm just going to create a width of 100 and a height of 20 for our button. I'm not going to worry about anything else. I'm not going to worry about going to a label right now. I'm not going to worry about variables or anything like that. I'm just creating basically a blank pixelated image of a button that says press me. So here we go. We have our first GUI, number 1, and we're going to have a look, and there we go. We have GUI1 with a button that says press me. Let's go ahead and create a few more. So I'm going to, because I'm a slow typer, I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it into here. And I'm going to do the same for our third GUI. Now what I need to do is, because this is our second GUI, I'm going to need to give it its own unique name. Now we can go through the whole thing that I said about naming before, but I'm just going to use my number system where this is GUI number 2, and everything that all the controls, I need to make sure that they have that name, and I'm going to switch the title to number 2. So now if I run it again, we now have 2 GUIs. This part here we'll get to in a second because I didn't edit this. So this is our third GUI, so we're going to change its name to number 3, number 3, number 3, and the title to number 3. We'll run it again, and now we have 1, 2, 3 GUIs all running at the same time. Now let's look at positioning these, because we don't want them overlapping like that. So this is something that I've covered before, but the first GUI, I'm going to set its X position to 0 and its Y position to 0, so it pops up in this top corner. I see that I have a width of 250, and I want a little bit of space in between it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 50 to that, so that gives me a 300. That gives me 300. So the next GUI for its X position, I'm going to set it to the width of the previous GUI plus 50 pixels in between it. So X 300, and because I don't care that they're all in the same row, the Y can stay the same. Y 0. I'm going to do the same with the last GUI. I have a width of 250. I want 50 pixels in between it, so I'm going to make this 300. So I add 300 to this position, which gives me a position of X 600. Once again, I don't care that it's on the top row, so I'm going to make this 0. And now what we should have is a GUI here, a GUI somewhere about here, and another one about here. And there we go. Okay, so that concludes this tutorial. Come back for the next one where we'll expand upon using multiple GUIs, and I'll see you there. Have a good day. Actually, you know what? Before I go, recently I had signed up for a Patreon, so if you'd like to sponsor these tutorials to help make them better and help expand upon the knowledge that is being contained within these AutoHotkey tutorials, you can go ahead and click on the Patreon page, and for as little as I think $1 a month, you can be a contributor towards the goal of making everything within the AutoHotkey language available to everyone through these tutorials. And I'll see you on the next one.